Welcome to the third episode of No Dice, a podcast series talking about female gambling addiction and stories of recovery across Scotland. I'm your host of the series, Kat Cochrane, and having been in compulsive gambling recovery for 4 years, I'll be sharing my own journey towards the goal of a gamble-free life. As a content warning, this episode does cover themes of addiction and gambling behaviour. In the first episode, titled Why Women Gamble is Different from Why Men Gamble, I wanted to lay the ground a little bit as to the female experience around the psychological, emotional, and societal reasons why women become involved in harmful relationships with gambling and why these differ from men. In this episode, we want to cover the types of support that are available for women across Scotland who are affected by their own gambling harms and the gambling harms of others. Joining me as a guest on the episode is Nicole Dawn, who is in the perfect position to share the positive news that support is out there due to her playing a massive part in the team behind the creation of the gambling harm support website called Ayla, which launched just earlier this year. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode, focused on talking about support, advice, and information for women across Scotland.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Firstly, to give a bit of background of the good work that you do, in July you celebrated 1 year in the role as creative connector for gambling harm at Simon Community. Can you share a little bit about what that role has entailed?
Yeah, happily. It was actually 1 year, 2 days ago. So this is almost like an anniversary podcast, which is really exciting. In terms of my role, the majority of it has been supporting women who have lived experience to support the development of a co-produced website that will be a safe psychological digital space for women who are impacted by gambling across Scotland. We have managed to develop this digital space that enables access to support information and useful tools as well as harm reduction. Co-design has been at the heart of the development of Ayla from the very start. It's been one of the most important parts of the project, making sure that the lived experience voices are really shining through. And without the input from the women who have lived experience, Ayla wouldn't be what it is today. It wouldn't have the representation such as the voices women and really grasp the harm of gambling on women throughout Scotland. That has been the core of the project in terms of my role. So I've been supporting the facilitation of those spaces and the relationships with the women. But alongside that, I've also been working with other professionals. So RCA Trust is one of our main partners on the project, and they've been vital in the development of the website and the content that is on there as well in terms of the support and the person-centered care. And then as well, we had Third Sector Lab, who have been the website developers for the website. And they were, again, core in the development, and they were involved in all of the group meetings and making sure that it really did reflect the needs of the women and the Scottish population.
That's brilliant. And can you share the background story of why Ayla was created to help support women affected by gambling harms in Scotland?
Yeah, so in terms of Simon Community Scotland, we predominantly work with people who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And the motivation between Simon Community Scotland getting involved within the gambling harm space is that women are increasingly being harmed by homelessness and by gambling harm. And there is a risk of homelessness if you're impacted by gambling harm. There isn't a direct support space within Scotland where women can access all of the support that's available. So what we wanted to create was a accessible and easy platform where women could make their own choices and have their voices heard in terms of the support that they were looking for, but also in terms of tailored information. So support specifically that may help women with topics and information that's relevant to them, for example, motherhood or childhood trauma or things like that. The existing spaces within gambling support do tend to be dominated by men. I don't think this is done purposefully, but it is, you just tend to see it throughout the support in Scotland and the UK. So what we wanted to do was create spaces where women felt safe. Women are also increasingly participating in gambling, and they have barriers to access support. And gambling organisations are also increasingly targeting women directly, which is becoming more and more challenging for women to reduce that harm and also create that layer of stigma for seeking support. Ayla was created to have a platform where women can go on and find everything they need in one space. So whether it's referrals, pathways, access to easy information, useful tools, or support as an affected other, everything is accessible within that one space.
Yeah, women have a much harder time connecting with others around gambling harms. I can testify to that. And I know how it was for me. And definitely the beauty of Ayla is it's a safe space where women can go and be understood, not just as gamblers, but as women who need support. And it's genuinely authentic support. I myself have got a very special connection to Ayla, as I was lucky to be part of the amazing group of women who were invited to be part of the development of the platform. Due to our lived experience of gambling harms, we were able to participate in regular meetings with yourself, Nicole, the team here at RCA Trust and Third Sector Lab. It was a place where us as women with lived experience felt valued, listened to, and the idea to be able to give something back to other women who are now perhaps in a position I was in a few years ago is everything and has been very much part of my own recovery journey. Yeah, so for me, nothing like Ayla exists 4 years ago, even up to last year. So it can be life changing and, in all seriousness, life saving for some women out there. So it's such an amazing platform. But even though Ayla now lives and breathes as an evolving digital support platform and safe space, what are the challenges in connecting with women across Scotland who are experiencing their own gambling harms?
I think in general, there's a misunderstanding of what harm from gambling can look like, and it does limit people to understand that they are being harmed by gambling. Therefore, they don't access the support that they need. And this is really important to highlight that it's not only financial harm that you can experience from gambling. You know, there's different sections of life that can be impacted, such as relationship breakdown and mental health, emotional breakdowns, and also violence against women, including economic abuse. And that can be seen both for affected others being impacted by someone else's gambling. Not only is there an individual lack of understanding of gambling harm in Scotland, but there's also a societal view that gambling isn't harmful. However, we know that that's not the case. There is a lot of stigma around harm from gambling, and women already experience gendered stigma due to different reasons. And then on top of that, you know, bringing them all together, it just creates a barrier of shame and limits women specifically to trying to access that support. Another challenge that we have found with Ayla and connecting with communities is that women from different backgrounds are more reluctant to access support. For example, you might have haram within Muslim faith communities, which is limiting women coming forward to access that support. Access to support is still limited within Scotland. There isn't a lot of in-person options, specifically in more rural areas, which can be a challenge as well. But Ayla does hope to reduce this by connecting to women across Scotland and encouraging women to support women. We also have been connecting with different organisations throughout Scotland and supplying training and delivering workshops for people they support as well. And we have our social media channels. So if you would like to follow along, we are Ayla Scotland on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you do want to connect, please get in touch and have a look on the website www.ayla-scotland.co.uk.
Plenty of information to unpack there, but earlier in your answer about how starting gambling in a societal way, you know, is a bit of fun, a bit of joy, whether it's with friends or family. And then there's this invisible line that we all go through, but women go through specifically, where because we don't really talk about our gambling, we sometimes miss that invisible line. And it's only in hindsight that it's been crossed, but it is very difficult to know exactly when it happens. And then the difficulties can start. And when the difficulties start for women, a lot of times the isolation is there. And then when the isolation is there, you just want to kind of keep those problems, keep those difficulties, keep that stress that's going on around gambling far away so we don't talk about it. And it's like, it's so important to know that there is support out there, because for myself, when I was gambling at I would say my heart, you know, like the worst kind of gambling I was doing, the isolation was the thing that really took me down. And because there wasn't anybody to talk to, it made me gamble even more. So the idea of just one woman being out there knowing that Ayla falling into her, like over a conversation or being spoke about or being found in organic ways or Googling or whatever it is, it's just fantastic to know that it exists. One of the things that I had difficulty with is that I didn't know that I was in trouble with gambling for such a long time. And some of the tips that can support you around reducing risk are definitely to talk to someone about gambling. And that can be the hardest thing, talking to somebody who's there and will listen and is willing to support. Some other tips around if your gambling's getting out of control is to set budgets and how much you spend monthly. Not even monthly, because when you get into gambling difficulty, monthly is out the window, it's daily, don't gamble when you're feeling strong emotions. That's one of the biggest things that I forgot to do. But then when you gamble, emotions are so heightened. And then emotions are heightened because you've gambled, and you just end up in a bit of a rut. So when the most emotional days and most emotional moments of life hit, try to keep away from gambling. Do not take gambling as a comfort. There's loads of little tips, but the thing is, you can learn so many more on the Ayla website. Those are just a couple that I know that I can learn from myself and have tried to learn from and pass on. Ayla has a very special space in the website which shares stories from women in recovery and from those affected by gambling harm. Can you tell us a little bit about the living library on the site?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So part of my role as the creative connector was to connect with women, to support them to share their experiences in whatever creative approach they wanted to. And this could be recognised or anonymous. I have to say this has been the highlight of my role to date. Some of the women shared with me that it was the first time that they've told their story from start to finish with anyone. And some things I learned no one else knew. I felt really privileged to be trusted with such vulnerable information, and it only strengthened the trust and the relationships with the women that I was working with. It was really such an amazing space, and I helped and facilitate the women to create different approaches to telling their stories and sharing their experiences. So, for example, one woman created a physical mask, and that was captured through photography, and it was the title page for her poetry book, which I would highly recommend going on reading all of the Lived and Living Library stories, because they're great. But this one in particular had a variety of different poems sharing her experiences. But the nice thing about it is it does take a lighthearted approach, but it also has the real vulnerable things. So the poems in the book, they all capture different emotions and feelings and experiences. At the end of the day, all of the women in that book, gambling isn't the only experience they've had in their life. So it was important that, it didn't just reflect their experience of gambling, but it reflected them as people, but also their experiences in life in general. Other creative approaches we've taken, we developed animations from experiences. We did spoken poems, spoken stories. There was a lot of written poems done. But yeah, in general, the experience the women have reflected was really important in terms of their journey and, that recovery pathway. I would also do a call out and say that the library is continuing to grow, and we would really encourage women that want to raise the voice of women in Scotland who are experiencing harm from gambling to get in touch. Again, I can support facilitation of sharing your story however you want, and it means that other women in Scotland will know that they're not alone. So if you are interested, just drop us an email at hello@ayla-scotland.co.uk.
I personally have a poem in the Living Library called A Future Not Where It Used to Be that I actually wrote in residential rehab 3 years ago. If somebody had told me, like any time before that I'd be writing poems, let alone sharing them, I would have laughed. But it's amazing. And the idea of being creative around our gambling journeys is the joy that it can bring. And for me, it was a springboard to writing more poems and short stories and publishing a collection and then a second collection. So it just goes to show how much creativity can be a real catharsis in recovery. And also just to be able to share it on the Ayla website holds a very special moment for me, and it makes me realise how far I've come personally. And I know it's similar to the other women who've shared their stories too. And of course, as you say, the library continues to grow in many ways. If you only have a look at one thing on Ayla today as a beginning, start there. That's like, if you want to go right there, because that is one place to go. Now, Ayla also offers support for women affected by the gambling harms of others, which is often a more forgotten aspect of gambling addiction. What support can women in this space find through the Ayla platform?
So I think this is a really important part to highlight, that women can be affected through someone else's gambling. Statistics actually show that for every person that gambles, 6 to 10 people around them are experiencing harm. So this space was created to support women impacted by someone else's gambling, as their experiences can be varied and different from people who are impacted by their own gambling. Within the support for affected others space, there are lots of different tools that they can use, but I do want to highlight that all of the support providers listed on the main support on AILA also support people who are impacted by someone else's gambling. So they support affected others and people impacted by their own gambling. There are specific support programs that are specific to affected others. So, for example, GamCare hosts a 6-week online support group, which was developed with people with lived experience of harm from someone else's gambling. And this supports with useful tools in terms of women's experiences. There's also a financial support section within the affected others space, as this is something that was identified as quite a big experience that affected others can often experience. And there's different organizations that can support both, including individuals and family. And this can be done online, but they also have listed of organizations that can support women in person in Scotland. Thriving Together also deliver an online specific financial capability program for women to better understand how to navigate their life while experiencing harm from someone else's gambling. This program is also open to people who are impacted by their own gambling, but it's more just about navigating finances and understanding how to overcome barriers within the financial sphere.
Yeah, I mean, when I was gambling, I didn't care about how it was affecting my partner, my family, my friends, and I didn't even think about where they could get support or if they needed support. So it's such an important aspect of gambling harm, like you say, the amount of people that are affected by just one person's gambling, not just within the families, but within friend groups, within communities. And it's like you say, it's something it's so overlooked. Possibly one of the reasons it is overlooked, like I mentioned there, is just because the gambler doesn't care. Because when we're compulsive gamblers, we're just so selfish and so careless and so thoughtless. And it's so important that there's space there for affected others. So it's fantastic to know that that is on the platform also. Now, another great resource that AILA offers is information for professionals looking to support women around gambling harms in the future. Can you share an example of what professionals can find on the platform?
Yeah, happily. So the For Professionals space wasn't something that we actually set out with an intention to create. During the co-design meetings, the conversation identified that it was an important space that was included due to professionals playing a large role in supporting people who are impacted by gambling. The knowledge around gambling harm in general is lacking, so it's vital that we created that platform to support information sharing, and we hope that it will support the conversations within the professional spaces and really support professionals. Within this space, we've made it simple for professionals to make referrals to organizations that can support people impacted by gambling, depending on the support they're looking for. So, for example, we have things like one-to-one support, women-led groups, mixed spaces, tailored support, and there's also other support tools to support them to limit their access to gambling through self-exclusion tools. Within the professional space, we've also included learnings like how to identify potential signs, or how to ask the question, and what to do if you think someone might be impacted by gambling, which is really important. And again, I would just emphasize it's about asking the question and starting the conversation. There's also access to a list of training that professionals across Scotland and the UK can access. Some of these are online and some of these can be organised in person. So, for example, we have the homelessness and gambling e-learning, which was created by Simon Community Scotland Fast Forward to better understand the links between homelessness and gambling. And then there's another example, which is the Bet You Can Help training, which is a first aid approach to reducing harm from gambling, which is hosted by the RCA Trust within Scotland. It's actually a training that I've been on, and I would highly recommend to any professionals that are looking to support people being harmed by gambling, but also in general, just in knowledge, because I think that gambling harm does affect such a big population in Scotland, that having that base knowledge to be able to support the people you're working with is really important.
At the AILA launch, just one of the three across Scotland, and the room was full of professionals working in various support sectors, and the engagement was incredible. The thirst to learn about the gambling experience and journeys for women was massive. I had so many people come up to me after the kind of main part of the launch itself, and I was asked questions I've never been asked before. And there was something that you mentioned earlier, ask the question, ask the question of your colleagues, ask the question of your relatives, ask the question of your partner, because more times than not, somebody who's struggling with gambling kind of wants to be asked the question. It'd be uncomfortable. It'll be possibly the toughest thing that they'll ever be asked. It will be a really, really sweaty, shifty, uncomfortable response 9 times out of 10. But for me, as soon as I was asked that question and I was given ultimatums and I was given basically no choice in coming forward about my gambling habits and my gambling behaviours, it kind of opened up so much. And that's really true for professionals who are working in support services. And the questions that asked me were brilliant. And it made me go away and think about the way that questions can be asked, the way they can be couched, because sometimes people might be in a position where they don't quite want to be outed around their gambling. So there's sensitivities around it. And that was the kind of questions that I was being asked, rather than if somebody just came up to you and announced it in a room, how would you feel about that? That's maybe not the right way to go about it, but there is other ways to go about it that we can all move forward with. So Ayla, for me, is truly a space of innovation and inspiration, and you can be very proud of all the work that you've done on it. What are your personal ambitions of how the Ayla platform can change the gambling support space in Scotland?
First of all, thank you so much. I am very proud of what we've managed to create on Ayla. I also feel so lucky to have had the opportunity to work with the amazing women who have been involved in this project and have been key and vital to create such a supportive space for women impacted by gambling. And I want to highlight that this is both the professionals working in the space, but also women with lived experience and just everyone that was involved in the project from start to finish. In terms of the ambitions, I think the main thing that I hope is that Ayla starts the conversation. Just as simple as that, because I think that the conversation isn't happening around harm from gambling. And I think that is the most important thing. And we want to be able to reduce that stigma for people across Scotland who are seeking support. I am really excited to get the word out about Ayla. And this has already started through different promotional techniques, but it's going to be an ongoing process throughout the next few years in terms of making sure we reach all parts of Scotland and everyone who is seeking support. I am hopeful that Ayla is a step in the right direction for women specifically who are seeking support in terms of having that gendered support and having that safe space for women who are impacted by gambling, by reducing barriers to access support that is tailored to people who are experiencing different layers of stigma. I also hope it aids professionals to engage with the people they support and identify the people that are being harmed by gambling, because I don't think gambling discriminates. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that aren't seeking support or haven't realized that they're experiencing harm from gambling. I'm excited for the Ayla groups. Later in the year, we're going to be launching Ayla in-person community groups and more online community groups. And these will be spaces where we can bring women together to share knowledge and just women support each other. So they will hopefully be running by the end of the year, which I'm really excited about. And I hope that that supports supports and encourages just women to support each other and create that community within Scotland. In terms of actions to take away from today, I would say ask the question and listen. And lastly, visit ayla-scotland.co.uk.
Yeah, it's an incredible site. It really is, because when I think back to September 2021, when my recovery started, and really at the time, for a woman living in Glasgow, I didn't know what my options were. I really did not know what my options were. Well, I did, because I thought the only option was GA. And I got along to GA the next meeting, like after the day that I kind of opened up to my partner at the time. And I just thought that was it. That was all there was GA. So got along, and I went into a room, and it was myself, another woman, and about 28 other men, or 28 men. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be something that is already feels like a bit of a barrier. This is, speaking, because they do want you to speak at GA. They want you to be there to listen and to speak. And for women going into rooms like that, thinking that's my only option, that's a huge barrier. And I mean, I'm not like anti-men or anything against any of the men that were in there, but there's a lot of women who, let's face it, a lot of their traumas around gambling might come from domestic abuse or past experiences around, in a kind of gendered way. So knowing that there is a safe space to dip in and out of for whatever the need in that particular day is incredible. It's so important, and I just wish it was there when I was, the day that I realised that I needed help. But luckily it's there now, and I dip in and out of it as well, because it's being refreshed. It's like a moving, living thing, and it's fantastic. So thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your story and the background around Ayla. The website address, just to reiterate, is ayla-scotland.co.uk, and can also be followed on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn.
The spelling for Ayla is AILA-Scotland.co.uk.
Actually, this gives us a good chance to speak about where the name came from, because we didn't do that, and I think that they can't quite finish this episode without speaking about that.
I agree with that. I think that this was probably one of the hardest things of my role over the last year, was finding a name for the website. Within the group, we toyed with lots of different things in terms of, do we do a pun on gambling? Do we have gambling in the name? But we landed on something linked to the Scottish identity. One of the women within the group felt she was in a really strong space and that she wanted other women to feel strong. And we Googled strong in Scottish Gaelic, and Ayla came up, and it means from a strong or resilient space, which really reflects what we want women to feel when they are in this online digital safe space, which will hopefully create in-person communities and create that safe space for women to share their experiences and support one another.
And am I also right in saying that it's the first of its kind? And I want to be asked ambitiously, is it the first of its kind in the world?
As far as we know, yes. I haven't, through my research, I haven't found anything else. And it's really important. I think there is other websites that are similar in other spaces for support, but there's nothing like this for women who are impacted by gambling within the world. As far as I'm aware.
It's something we can be so proud of in Scotland. It genuinely is. It's so good. Innovation, creation, helping women is everything. I hate that cliche, a one-stop shop, but in this case, I don't mind using it because it is what it is, and that just encaptures the whole thing.
It's funny you say that, because I was trying the whole podcast not to use that terminology, but that is what it is.
I'll throw it out there. It's fine. I'll throw it out there because in this case, it's actually quite unique and relevant and appropriate most of all. Thank you so much, Nicole. This has been an amazing podcast episode to share the story of Ayla and the background and how we can help women who are struggling with their own gambling experiences and being affected by the gambling harm of others. On the next episode, we'll be talking about gambling behaviours mixed with other harms and addictions. So thank you so much for listening, and catch you next time on No Dice, a 12-episode series discussing female gambling addiction and women's recoveries across Scotland.